Welcome back for episode 7 of Nama's Bronze to Diamond journey. For anyone who's joining for the first time, we've set a terrible Bronze Elo player on a mission to achieve Diamond in just 4 months with skill capped. As always though, let's check in on his progress first. Nama is doing very well, already hitting Gold 3. He often does very well hard carrying a lot of his games, but there is a bit of a consistency problem. With the fundamentals that he's learned so far, Nama constantly acquires leads during the early game, but sometimes fails to close out games. We've identified 2 of the core issues that we often see from players in this elo range. One is his farming. The very first thing that we taught him was how to get his CS numbers up during the laning phase, but his farming takes a huge dip in the mid and late game. This is expected since he doesn't know what to do, but when you have leads as big as he gets, you should be getting 9 to 10 CS per minute because you're unable to be stopped. His farm numbers are still good for his elo, but with proper macro, he'd be able to carry even more games. His second core issue is his teamfight positioning. That's what we'll be focusing on today. Teamfighting is a super complex and broad topic, but the issue Nama is facing is easily fixed and should help keep him from throwing games. Lastly, we want to make it super clear that we are not privately coaching Nama. We're not giving him any advice outside of the guides that we put in this course, so you can follow at home with the exact same information. If we ever teach Nama something or recommend a guide, it will be featured in the skill capped course. Alright, let's get into it. Nama's problem in teamfights is an issue many low elo players have. Very often, he's overextending in teamfights and being caught out, dying in easily avoidable ways. This is even worse because one of the rules given to Nama was that he has to buy Mcbaze Soul Stealer every game. Dying once or twice is fine, but he is constantly throwing his lead and stacks, making him much weaker than he should be. Luckily for him, this issue is really simple to fix and takes no time to implement into your games at all. Nama is trying way too hard to do too much. Very often in fights, he's looking for crazy flanks or leaving his teammates' side. This simply does not work with his champion pool. All 3 of his champions are front to back team fighters. Even Ahri doesn't like flanking too much recently. Ever since her damage got gutted, she is typically best being played as a backline mage using her charm to set up her team. Not only is he consistently playing his own champions too aggressively, but he's not exploiting the fact that he's playing in low elo. Let's hear some observations Hector had about one of Nama's games.
In low elo, it's not really about playing well, it's about not being bad. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you don't have to win, you just wait for the enemy to lose. Like for example here, you're already doing fairly well with 8 stacks, and then you just get a random kill. And it's like, did you do anything for that kill?
No.
Yeah, you just walked at her. They're gonna try and defend, and Kane just dies. Again, you landed your charm, but did you do anything for this kill?
Except that. So yeah, he just walked out.
Yep. It's not like you're setting up waves, it's not like you're pressuring. The enemy team's just walking into your stuff. Your team almost has it. And then this Lulu walks up to the wall and dies. Like, it just keeps going over and over. Hold on, another example. Okay, you guys are just sitting here. Look how obviously you guys are camping the jungle. It's so obvious.
I remember this fit.
Yeah. It's so absurdly obvious. And what's gonna happen? So you started at 8 stacks and now you're at 25. And okay, I'm not critiquing you, like you're in position for these kills, but are like you really doing anything for them?
No.
Okay, and that's basically the most important point, is that, and how it will reflect in teamfights. People play teamfights the exact same way. They're really dumb and they just kind of walk into you and your team because they don't know how positioning works.
Don't worry, we've made sure Hector won't be fiddling with bottle caps during these sessions anymore. But his rant about those picks brings up a good point. Teamfighting is ridiculously hard to learn and teach. There's so many variables involved. If players in low elo get caught out this easily when nothing is going on, then you can only assume their teamfight positioning will be even worse. Which is why, especially on a champion pool like Nama's, there's absolutely no need to feel pressured to go for huge outplays in fights. And like we said, this was one of Nama's biggest issues. He felt very compelled in most fights to play overly aggressive, or looking for flanks in order to make something happen. But you don't need to make anything happen. That's the key to winning teamfights in low elo. Let's take a look back at those teamfights we just saw of Nama getting caught out. During this fight, Nama runs around to try and set up a flank. Let's ignore a lot of factors, such as the fact that he's in full vision of the whole team and his ult being down as well. We're not sure what his goal was here. Even by going around, he's really not in range to threaten anyone but Kayn anyway. He could have done that just by standing next to his Elise and Ashe. We'd be giving this low elo Kayn way too much credit, thinking that he'd react appropriately and back off if Nama were standing here. He'd likely just continue tunnel visioning on the Shen and die to a charm. The exact same scenario occurred in this other death that we saw. After a lost fight, Nama and his team retreat into this jungle corridor. Once his Scion comes to back him up, instead of shooting skill shots freely from behind his front line, he once again has the bright idea of looking for a flank. That's another 10 lost Magi stacks, completely throwing his lead. All of this is likely a symptom of a very bad low elo mentality. Players think that hitting frontline champions is bad, and that they need to hit the enemy carries. It's fair to assume that if you use chat in low elo, you're probably seeing that said quite a lot. But in actuality, proper teamfighting is just hitting frontline most of the time with the rest of your team. The reason low elo players may think it's bad is because they oftentimes don't actually farm properly or itemize correctly. This leads to a lot less damage potential, which makes the enemy frontline seem tankier than they really are. Thanks to our previous lessons though, Nama doesn't have that issue anymore. He builds fairly well and usually gets strong early game leads. He's just throwing games trying to do too much with a bad mentality. Also, it may seem like we're advocating playing really safe, but that wasn't the point at all. What we want to get across is understanding the difference between a death stemming from bad habits and a death you can actually learn from.
I'm going to say that this was not a dumb death, and the reason for that is here, what went wrong. You kind of misspaced. Like if you hadn't misspaced, and that's just a mechanics thing that you're still working on, right? You wouldn't have gotten auto-attacked, and you wouldn't be half health. But then you're playing the fight really well. You're just standing back and like letting Swain frontline and helping him. But then a random Hecarim fast, like super fast, walks at you and kills you. And that's really hard to predict. Like your positioning was kind of fine. Like, you just got caught off guard by something unexpected.
Yeah.
The point with good deaths is that you can easily learn from it like we just heard. Nama now knows to work on his spacing when it comes to zoning ADCs, and is likely more aware of how fast Hecarim can travel with his E now. Compare that to this. What do you learn here? All you can usually tell yourself is to stop being stupid. Let's take a look at an example of a game Nama played after his lesson. He's once again dominating the game and is sieging with his team. He's spacing close to his teammates, looking for some damage, and immediately dies to Malphite ultimate. Again, this is a fine death. He wasn't absurdly mispositioned, and it's very easy to learn that he needs to either track Malphite's CDs better or just stand farther back. Very simple lessons to apply to future games. He's gone on to easily apply this guide's lesson, and he has had much more success in his games. He's throwing his leads a lot less since he just plays around his teammates more often now. Alright, that's it for that lesson, so let's wrap things up with our weekly quiz. Question number 1. What wave tactic should you use to punish melee champions early on in mid lane? A slow push is the correct answer. That way you can zone them from farm while pushing and harass them a ton when they try to last hit under tower. Question number 2. If one player has 2 kills and 50 CS, and the other has 0 kills and 90 CS, who should be ahead in gold? The player with 90 CS would have more gold. On average, minions are worth 20 gold each, so the 40 CS would give 200 more gold than the 2 kills. Alright, that's it for this guide. Stay tuned for next week where we'll cover mid-game macro. Learning how to farm in mid and late game will really accelerate how fast Nama climbs, as it's one of the final fundamentals that we need to cover that he needs to know. Anyway, we'll see you there. Thanks for watching.